Imagine two children running barefoot through a forest so dark, even the moonlight dares not shine. Their lungs burn with each desperate breath, their feet ache with every uncertain step. They are fleeing, but from what? Or from whom? This is not a story of simple survival. It's a story of escape, guilt, and the haunting echoes of a past that refuses to stay buried. 10 years ago, two children named Isley and Kansas found themselves at the mercy of an unrelenting force, a community led by a man known only as the Minister. His methods were cruel, his power absolute, and his control inescapable. But for Isley and Kansas, escape wasn't just a fleeting hope. It was the only way to survive and to be together. For Kansas, Isley was more than a friend. She was the light that kept him going in the darkest of times. He loved her with a quiet intensity, the kind that didn't need words to prove itself. Every step they took through the mud and darkness was fueled by a shared dream of freedom, a life where they could finally breathe without fear, where Kansas could hold Isley's hand in the daylight without looking over his shoulder. Kansas had always been Isley's protector, his steadfast loyalty unshaken by the pain they endured. He would have gone to the ends of the earth for her, and running away wasn't just about survival. It was about carving out a chance to live a life they'd only whispered about in stolen moments. A life where they could laugh, love, and be free together. That night, the air was charged with desperation. Isley, Kansas, and their friend Constantine had spent years enduring unspeakable torment within the minister's grasp, victims of a twisted community known as the family. For Isley, each day was a struggle to hold on to her sanity as the minister's sermons declared her existence to be one of servitude. The girls, including Isley, were subjected to relentless purifications where icy water was poured over their trembling bodies in the dead of night, while chants of absolution echoed around them. They were denied food and sleep for days at a time, their fragile bodies pushed to the brink of collapse as their cries for mercy were met with silence. In those moments of isolation, pain became their only constant companion. Whispers of escape were fleeting dreams, crushed under the weight of the punishments meted out to those who dared to resist. But when the opportunity arose, the three clung to it like a lifeline, knowing that freedom came with a cost. And not everyone makes it out alive. Shelley Vale, a town steeped in tradition and secrecy, bore witness to unspeakable horrors hidden beneath its picturesque surface. Beneath its surface, the family operated an underground community where every aspect of life was dictated by unyielding rules and fear. Children were stripped of their individuality, their names replaced with titles of servitude, and were subjected to relentless indoctrination through sermons that turned the minister's whims into unquestionable doctrine. Rituals were central to the family's control. One of the most harrowing was the ceremony, a cruel rite of passage that marked young girls' transition into womanhood, treating them as offerings rather than individuals. Physical punishments for minor infractions were brutal and public, designed to instill fear in all who witnessed them. Families were separated, and bonds between individuals were intentionally broken, ensuring loyalty only to the minister. There were whispered accounts of underground chambers used for psychological torment, and worse, for rituals involving the purification of disobedient members. Food and sleep were often withheld to purge members of their sins, leaving them weak and pliable. Perhaps most sinister of all, any who questioned the family's methods disappeared, their fates known only to the minister and his inner circle. The idyllic facade of Shelley Vale masked this grim underworld, where the minister's doctrine turned the town into a place of absolute control and unrelenting terror. Isley and Kansas's story began here, but to understand their escape, one must first understand their prison. The family thrived on fear. Punishments were swift, isolation was a weapon, and the minister's sermons turned into gospel. For Isley, the nightmare intensified the day she became a target of what the family called the ceremony. She didn't understand why it was happening. They said it was something to celebrate, but all she felt was dread. The ceremony was the minister's way of marking a girl's transition into womanhood. But for Isley, it was a cruel turning point. The family's twisted traditions sealed her fate, leaving her and Kansas with only one option: to run. Rain lashed at their skin as the forest became both refuge and tormentor. Kansas, the boy with glasses and a protective heart, urged Isley forward. Together, they pushed through the mud and the darkness, haunted by every crack of a branch and every distant whistle that signaled pursuit. At one point, as they stumbled through a shallow ravine, Isley's foot caught on a protruding root, sending her tumbling hard to the ground. A sharp cry escaped her lips as she clutched her ankle, pain radiating through her leg. The sounds of their pursuers grew louder, the baying of hounds cutting through the storm. Kansas's heart pounded as he dropped to his knees beside her, his hands trembling as he tried to assess her injury. "You have to go," Isley gasped, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Leave me. They'll catch us both if you stay." Kansas's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the thunder. Without hesitation, he pulled her arm over his shoulder and hoisted her up. Every step forward was agony for both of them, but Kansas bore the weight without complaint, his determination unwavering. As the barking drew closer, Kansas spotted an abandoned hunting cabin partially hidden by thick underbrush. With a burst of energy, he half-dragged, half-carried Isley toward it. Inside, he quickly barricaded the door with a heavy table and positioned them in the darkest corner. Isley could see the strain etched on his face, the way his hands trembled as he whispered reassurances. When the hounds finally reached the cabin, their snarls filled the air, accompanied by the distant shouts of their handlers. Kansas pressed a finger to his lips, silently urging Isley to stay quiet. He held her close, shielding her with his body as if he could physically ward off the danger outside. For what felt like hours, they remained perfectly still, the pounding of Isley's heart matching the storm's fury. Eventually, the sounds faded, and the forest grew eerily silent once more. "We're safe," Kansas finally whispered, his breath warm against her ear. But Isley knew the truth. They were only safe because Kansas had refused to abandon her. He had risked everything to keep her alive, and in that moment, she realized just how deeply he loved her. Isley didn't know where they were going. Just away. Away from the screaming, the prayers, and the other sounds. Kansas's determination kept them moving, but guilt lingered in every step. Constantine had stayed behind, a choice made not out of hesitation but necessity. When the minister's guards cornered them at the edge of the underground chambers, Constantine turned back, creating a diversion that allowed Isley and Kansas to flee. With a whispered promise to hold them off, he charged at their pursuers, armed with nothing but a broken wooden beam. His cries echoed through the halls as the sound of footsteps faded into the distance. His sacrifice allowed Isley and Kansas to escape. But at what cost? Kansas made a promise that they'd make them pay. For Constantine. For all of them. 10 years later, Isley and Kansas had built the life they once dreamed of, a quiet existence far from the shadow of Shelley Vale. Their days were simple, filled with the comforts of routine. Isley tended to her lush garden while Kansas repaired old furniture in a modest workshop. They shared laughter over breakfast, read books by the fire, and took long walks under the stars. To anyone looking in, they were the picture of serenity. But beneath the surface, the scars of their past ran deep. The nightmares still came for both of them, unrelenting in their vividness. Kansas would wake in the middle of the night, his body tense and his breath shallow, only to find Isley sitting by the window, lost in thought as she clutched the necklace Constantine had given her. Their silence on certain nights spoke volumes, a shared understanding that no amount of normalcy could fully erase what they had endured. Kansas's hands, steady in his work, sometimes trembled when a memory struck him unbidden. Isley, even in the safety of their home, flinched at the sound of heavy footsteps or the creak of old wood. They had found the life they dreamed of, yes, but the weight of their survival, the secrets they carried, and the guilt they bore for those left behind, remained as unrelenting as the shadows they had fled. And yet, even in the heaviness, they found solace in each other. Kansas would often pull Isley close, his voice a quiet promise in the dark. No matter what haunts us, I'll always keep you safe. Some things don't leave people. They grow. They twist into something else, but they're still there. Isley's garden is her sanctuary, but it's also a reminder. Each plant holds a story, each petal a memory. For Kansas, the reminders are far more physical. Scars, both seen and unseen, are a testament to their survival. But survival is not the same as living. Isley and Kansas have tried to move forward, but the past refuses to let go. Closure. That's the word they use. But for Isley and Kansas, closure was not something they sought. It was something thrust upon them. It began with an anonymous letter mailed to a major production company. The letter, written in shaky but precise handwriting, detailed the horrors of the family and promised access to long-buried evidence, photographs, journal entries, and even recordings from within the minister's compound. The letter's origins were never publicly disclosed, but whispers among Shelley Vale's residents suggested it came from someone who had escaped the family's grasp but lived in silence for decades, too afraid to speak until now. Others claimed it was left by a guilt-stricken former member of the minister's inner circle. The promise of exclusive access and the allure of exposing such a chilling story was irresistible to the documentary crew. When the filmmakers arrived in Shelley Vale, they were met with a divided community. Some welcomed the chance to uncover the truth, believing it would exorcise the town's lingering ghosts. Others saw it as reopening wounds that would never heal, dragging the survivors, including Isley and Kansas, into a spotlight they had spent years avoiding. Cameras rolled as questions surfaced, unearthing the unspeakable. The crew's relentless pursuit of answers began pulling at threads that led deeper into the family's labyrinth of manipulation, suffering, and loss, threatening to unravel the fragile piece Isley and Kansas had tried so hard to rebuild. With the cameras rolling, Isley and Kansas face a choice: to speak or to stay silent, to confront their demons or let them fester. But the truth is rarely so simple. The deeper the documentary digs, the more the past unravels. Secrets come to light. Secrets that were meant to stay buried. 10 years ago, they ran for their lives. Today, they face the memories that chase them. But some truths are heavier than others, and not all shadows can be outrun.
Thank you so much for joining me today and for taking the time to dive into this incredible story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any suggestions for future stories. And just a heads up, I've got a brand new thrilling story dropping tomorrow, so make sure to stay tuned. Thanks again for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.